So I'm coming to Japan to do medical research and studying certain aspects of Oriental medicine here in Japan. And then at that time in early 90s, there were a lot of young Israeli travelers. And then you find out that that guy that looks like a, American native chief, like with all these feathers and all these things sticking out of his ear, he walked for each tefillah an hour and a half, and he's keeping kosher, and that's how it started. And later on, it became Beit Chabad.
Joining me today, we have someone from very far away. His name is Rabbi Dr. Hertsel Simantov, and he's all the way from Japan, the Far East. Rabbi Hertsel is a rabbi and a doctor who lives with his family in Japan, and we're going to hear all about his story. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So first of all, tell us a little about where you were born. I understand you were born in Afghanistan.
Correct. Yes, my family, both sides, were Afghani Jews for many generations. People are not very familiar with Afghani Jews, but they lived there
No.
for a few hundred years. It's
Wow.
a longer history. I mean, there are excavations and some archaeological discoveries that dates to the 12th century, 11th century, to have a very large Jewish community living in Afghanistan, that area. It used to be
Wow.
part of the greater, they call it the Khorasan Empire, was part of the Persia, part of the south of Russia, and Afghanistan. It used to be part of a whole kingdom. And the Jews, it's the Silk Road, and the Jews were very fundamental to that area in the sense of being part of the commerce and society and culture.
Do you remember life there in Afghanistan?
Oh, of course. Okay, the story is very simple. We lived there very happily. And then I was at the age of 12 and my brother became bar mitzvah. And the Jews in Afghanistan in general were, I think they didn't call themselves Zionists. They're Jews, and Jews belong to Israel. So, and it was very, very obvious that the ultimate will be to live in Israel and Eretz Israel. So our family were one of the last ones who
to leave
Afghanistan, but my mother's family and my father's family, they were in Israel already. So when the first boy of the family had a bar mitzvah, and so we went to Israel.
Right.
And Baruch Hashem, we went to Israel because the Russians invaded, and we stayed.
Wow. So you just left everything behind. I mean, it was pretty sudden leave.
Yes. Everything was behind. Everything was left behind, and unfortunately, my father went back, and he was there for a few years. And for us, children growing up in Israel without father and new country, new language, new society, new everything. And
so what, he was stuck there? Why did he go back?
Because again, the Russians and the war with the
Right.
Jahidin, and it was not easy to.
Right.
It wasn't because of the government. It's just the situation was very, very chaotic, and
right. So that must have been hard growing up with him there and you in Israel.
It wasn't. It was not easy.
Right.
I'm not sure that you're familiar growing up in Israel as a kid, especially from another type of culture, that everything was different. I mean, again, the Jewish community was very close knit. Everyone was, Baruch Hashem, quite well off, and everything was centered around Yiddishkeit. I mean, there was not such a thing of people who are not. There were two things: you are Jewish, and there are people who are not Jewish. I remember that when we landed in Israel, in Ben Gurion, like and I was looking around. So I asked my mom, why there's so many non-Jews around here? For me, it was a shock, shock to see.
Right.
And she shut me up. So I'll explain to you later. And then step by step to understand that there are many types of Jews. But in Afghanistan, there
Wow.
was not many types of Jews. There are Jews and there are non-Jews. They're going,
Wow.
and the worst
Wow.
thing was you're acting like a goy, and that was
Mm.
the bottom line. That's the worst thing to be
Wow.
said. So the
Right.
Jews who were
Wow.
in Afghanistan had a very, very comfortable life, you
Mhm.
know, and but again, the whole idea was that it's temporary. They lived there hundreds
Right.
of years, but it was temporary, meaning that
Right.
ownership of land was very not common, meaning that
Oh,
most of the people rented their houses, also because of the government, some restrictions, but except the synagogue and in the Jewish Bet Chaim, Bet Almin, the cemetery. I don't think that many Jews owned land.
in
Few did.
Afghanistan.
Right.
Interesting.
Majority were just renting, and when the time comes, they could just give up. And I asked my father once, why you didn't buy anything? You're a businessman, you're successful, you're a rabbi, and everything. He said, no. When we buy land, we do it in Israel. We don't do it.
Mm.
So that
So
that was the
that was
attitude.
the feeling, that was the attitude that this
That's the
isn't
attitude.
our real home.
Right. That was the attitude. And
Wow.
then you live to Israel, and you're living among many types of Jews, and
Right.
that's Baruch Hashem. I'm not. It's the best thing happened to us, because imagine that growing up in a place that Yiddishkeit wise, it's very nice, but
Right.
it's good for children, but not as you grow older, because
Right.
there's no challenges, there's no yeshiva studying in higher order, etc., etc.
Right. For sure. Wow. So you were able to do that in Israel. You moved there and you studied there. You got your smicha there, and you also became a doctor there.
Well, it was a little bit more complicated than that.
Tell
Um,
us. Tell
yeah,
us.
I was in yeshiva. I was in yeshiva
Mhm.
studying yeshiva. Um, I was involved in medicine from very young age. The style of learning in Afghanistan was that there was a Talmud Torah that kids would go to Cheder or Talmud Torah. It
Mhm.
was obvious everyone went. Also the girls. People
Mhm.
don't, when I tell this, some people
People
they were
don't
like,
know that. Yeah. The
girls go
girls
to
were also
the,
right. You would
the Talmud Torah was boys and girls. Girls
interesting.
as they get older, they learn more intrinsic halachot, the nikur, like what we do, the preparation of the kashering, the meat.
Right.
The women did,
The
and
women did that, and
then
that's a very hard part, the nikora, from what I
that's
understand.
very
Yes.
you need a lot of patience, a lot of knowledge, and I can tell you many stories that later on as a rabbi, when you get smicha and you're involved with kashrut, and then you see my mom's an expert. Like
Right.
my mom is a
Right.
rabbi. She's really
Right.
expert. She knows
That's
that
right.
normal rabbis don't know. So
Right. And all the girls and women knew that in Afghanistan.
in Afghanistan, most of the girls knew. They knew everything to deal with kashrut, kashering meat, chickens, and everything.
Mhm.
Difficult questions about halacha. If the cow, of course, everything was shecht. Everything was fresh. It was done locally, and there was no frozen meat or frozen chicken. It was
Right.
unheard. Okay, and people had everything at hand. And so the girls, and later on the ladies and the women, they were completely versed in all
Mhm.
the.
The
It
intricate
wasn't
laws,
right. It wasn't by the book, but they knew all the.
they knew.
My mom said when we were young girls, they told us sit down and watch and learn, and we did.
Mm.
That was life.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So
So
was it more the practical laws that the women were studying? Did they study also other things, or it was more practical?
very practical, and the learning in general. And I can tell you this, as I got older. Um, in Israel, when you go to yeshiva, it's very logical, and you go to yeshiva, you learn Gemara and in the halachic discussions. And when I was talking, as there's a period of your life that you agree or you disagree with your parents, and as you grow
Right.
older, you say, well, you disagree, but you don't know much, right? The
Right.
realization comes later on. So my debate as a young Bachur, yeshiva Bachur, was that my father never, when he was dealing with the text of the Torah, like example, he didn't deal with the pshat, what we say, as the normal
A simple
pshat,
explanation, the face value.
the face value, the way that the Rashi says, and then the Rashi brings the midrash. Late, only at the age of 50 plus 60, when he was in Israel, he started dealing with Rashi the way we learn at a young age. So I asked him, how do you learn? I mean, everything for you is Drash and Remes and later on Kabbalah. But what about the Pshat? And how do you understand this psukim? So he told me, come, sit here and I'll tell you. And this is completely different. It's a completely different way of studying Torah. Completely different. I mean, I don't want to go into detail like, all this Torah discussion, but there's a lot of stories in the Torah, right? About these ancient histories of these giants and people living in Israel. And this is like history with sub-history, with sub-context. And you ask yourself, I don't know how to create a tefillin. There's no instruction that the tefillin has to be this color. And it just say put tefillin totafot, right? But it doesn't have
Right.
the instruction how to make it tefillin. We don't have to make
Right.
tefillin. That's the oral tradition. So my
Right.
father's question was, why I need to know about the giants, the zamzumim and kafturim and pachlutzim, etc., etc., etc. All these things. He said, I will tell you. And he was doing the drash and different world, completely different world.
Wow.
And
Wow.
from that
So his
to derive halacha is so. As you can understand, it was more towards drash and what we call
so
it kabbalistic.
more
It
mystical elements of
right,
Torah,
right.
more interesting, more esoteric and mystical
Right. So it
parts.
was very centered. Everything that we're doing was more in the kabbalistic terms. And they didn't say it's Kabbalah, or they didn't make an
Right.
issue out of this, right? That Okavir Mukubalim. That's what they did. That's like
Right.
studying Tehillim, saying Tehillim for certain purposes, and they were successful. People
Right.
who understand what I'm
Interesting.
saying, people, and they were successful, or doing certain, midrashic Zaharic learning for gaining certain, and they were successful. I mean, I can tell you
Mm.
one story, and people will say it's Baba Mises, but I heard it from one of my relatives. She said, right, I told her about later on when we came to Israel about the stories about big Kubalim and big Hasidim, Baal Shem Tov and his students, all the things that happened to them. And she said, okay. She said one night in Afghanistan when I woke up, it was very hot summer, and I saw your grandfather and few others studying in the courtyard, and there's a fire around them. And for us, it
Mm.
was very normal. I was like, "Ooh." I mean, later on, you say, really? She said, well, you think I'm making stories? But she said it like it was. So again, we don't talk
Right.
about things because it's stories. But
So it was so it was a very interesting life, a very
yeah,
mystical kind of life.
right. Yes,
Wow,
I
very
mean,
interesting.
it was very normal, simple life,
Right. But it
and
sounds like a very
very
spiritual life.
right. It's very, very. I don't know if it's spiritual. It's Jewish. Very simple.
Jewish.
Simple Jews. It's
Right.
very Jewish. Very simple Jews.
Right.
Simple people. They worked. Everyone worked,
Right.
including my father. Some of them were merchants. Some were, and they were rabbis. Most of them,
Mm.
and they were very into. Again, study Torah was not an issue. It was part of life. I
Right.
mean,
Sounds
you
like it
have
was very integrated. The whole
right.
life
I
was
mean,
very integrated. Who you were, what you did was
exactly
just who you were.
right.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
that's what I'm saying. There was very simple Jews, very simple,
Right.
and for
Right.
them it was not. You know, Today you have a yeshiva. If you go to yeshiva, you have to study Torah, and unfortunately, people come home and then, you know,
Right.
have other things to do.
Right.
But for them, it was. this is
It was
how
very integrated. Everything was just
right,
this is what it means to be a Jew.
exactly,
Interesting.
exactly.
And so
I'm not
so
saying
you
everyone was in the same degree. There was people who
right.
were friends, people some less, but that the atmosphere around it, the
Right.
imuna. I mean, I can tell you one story. Okay, just to, I mean, maybe it's even a little bit graphic. Um, I was in yeshiva and in Israel, and there's a new mode of education to teach the kids imuna. It's
Mhm.
called, class of imuna. I got bored.
Emunah means faith, right.
But Hashem and why
Mhm.
we are here, what we are looking for, like all these. Unfortunately, there too much attention to these. But if people think that kids need it today, and
Mhm.
I don't agree. But people, that's what the mode of the pedagogics, in the teaching circles are. So during these classes, I got bored and I was painting, and the rabbi caught me and she said, "What? I'm talking about Imuna, about Hashem and everything, and you." So they called my parents, and from Afghanistan, from Afghani Jew, that someone's calling your parents to come by the Rosh Yeshiva, it's unheard of, meaning that I
Right.
was very bad. And she came all the way. It was like 2 hours drive from where she was, and her Hebrew is not so good. And she had to use the Rosh Yeshiva. What's the problem? He said, your son, this and this, a Shur Imunah. He has no shows of respect to the rabbi, and he's listening, participating, he's painting. So, and she asked me in Persian, in Afghani, what's Emunah? So, what is this class of Emunah? I said, about Hashem and everything. She said, what? So I said, yeah, they're talking about Hashem, to believe in Hashem and how to do the mitzvot, why to do the mitzvot, what does it mean to do the mitzvot. This is Emunah. She said, so I mean, she's now getting on board. I came, she says to me, 2 hours to hear this nonsense. And so the Rosh Yeshiva sees that she's getting agitated and she says, what your mom says. So I tell she has difficulty understanding about the necessity of Shurei Emunah, the Emunah classes. She said, and he said, no, you have to explain to her. Emunah, it makes you, ruchniut, and, the understanding,
Spiritual.
spiritual. And she shut him up and she said, no, no, no. Emunah comes from the chalab of the mother. She
Mm.
pointed on her chest. She said, it comes from the milk of the mother. No classes. And he was
Mm.
like, ooh. So he told me, okay, you're exempt. You go. So that is
That's what life was like in
that was life.
Afghanistan.
It
It was
goes
just
through,
so
right,
faith was just all around you. It was just you were
exactly,
imbued with it. It wasn't
right,
something you needed to learn or study. It was so natural,
right.
right?
And that's what we do here in
Wow.
Japan. And I tell the Jews, the people, that don't be frum, don't be religious. The word dat is not even Hebrew. In the whole Tanakh, if you look, maybe there's 6, 7 times the word dat as a religion. The word dat religion is actually mentioned, and it's mentioned the most by, I don't know if you know, by Haman, right?
Mm.
Because the word dat
Mm.
is an old Persian word. Zoroastrian is the religion of the old Persia, the Iranian, and it means the laws of God. They're the two gods. They're fighting with each other, and the laws
Mm.
actually to pacify them, etc., etc. And the word data comes from that word, means information. So,
Interesting.
so for us, Yadut is halacha, is helech, is what you do, is how you proceed, the way of life, how a Jew
Right.
lives his life. It's not religion in a sense of religion. We have no religion. We have a way of life,
Right.
and
Judaism isn't a religion. It's so much more. Yes.
I mean,
It's
this is what we are, and that's how we do things. So you don't
right.
eat kosher because it's your religion. I mean, I can tell you another story. And I travel a lot because of my work and with kashrut and everything. And one flight on the way to Israel, there was a stopover in Europe. There was no direct flights then, and the connection was like 4 or 5 hours. We were in Europe, and there was another Israeli guy, high-tech guy, who was on the plane. And I went to the lounge because after so many flights, you get all these upgrades and privileges with the
Right.
everything. All right. And I see this poor kid sitting there next to the wall and doing his work. Everything is dark, middle of the winter. So I told him in Hebrew, "You Israeli, right? Just come with me to the lounge. I can, as my guest." So we enter into the lounge, and then it hits me. Said the guy, if he was sitting here to eat something not kosher, he has to spend money. Now he goes with me into the lounge. There are all these European trefos, I mean, it's a,
Non-kosher foods, all delicacies.
all this. They said, then, I'm Messiah, I'm cause, without me, he wouldn't have. So I was all this halachic debate, what? So I said to him, look, my dear friend, we're going there, but it's my responsibility. And I ask you, please do me a favor because it's my responsibility and don't eat the non-kosher food. He looked at me and he
Right.
said, non-kosher food? Oh, yeah, for you, it's not allowed. I was like shocked. I was like physically, like, was like someone attacked me physically. I said, me? My? I said, us is not allowed. We are not allowed
Right.
to eat this. And he was like, now his sister to be shocked. I said, we're Jews. We don't eat kosher because we're a religion. This is what it means to be Jewish. So he looked
Mhm.
at me and he said, it's too early in the morning. Anyway, I'll just drink coffee. I didn't plan to eat anything, but you give me a lot to think about. So
Right.
this idea that if you're religious, then you don't eat kosher, you put tefillin, you go to shul, you daven and everything. If you're not religious, right? You're not
Right.
from, you're patur. You don't have to do
Right.
it. It's
Right.
not
So that wasn't you grew up that it was just so simple. It was just who you
very
are,
simple,
and it was just nothing to
right?
even, like, think about or debate. Interesting.
Exactly.
So,
And today
so I
also it's simple. Today also it's
it's
simple. We have to reignite that idea that today to be Jewish is very, very simple. It just be
right, and
yourself. That's it.
interesting, and the faith was also so simple to you. You didn't need to have a class on Emunah because it was just natural to you.
I mean, it's a waste of time.
So
We're talking
you never had any doubts in faith or
doubts.
in
Doubts about Hashem.
doubts
How is
about
it possible?
Hashem, about mitzvot, challenges in doing
No,
it.
no challenges. If I tell you I have no challenges, then either I'm a malach or I should be dead. I'm, I'm not a
Right.
malach. I can tell you. Of course, a challenge. The challenge
Right,
is to live. That's life.
right,
Is it now?
right.
We
You're
don't
not an
exist.
angel,
We live, and when you live, there are challenges. And
right. So your background is very fascinating, how you have this simple, basic faith in everything that is Judaism. It's so integrated in your life. I wanna understand a little bit more how you got there. Like, let's go back to you're back in Israel, you were learning about medicine. How did you become a
okay.
doctor?
So let's go back to medicine. In Afghanistan, as I said, we studied in cheder, boys and girls, and also we went to normal school, like the normal, you know, there's no Jewish school, so there was the non-Jewish school, but it was very easy because it was for the Jews was very, very segregated. We were into our own, but you had to learn maths and all other scientific uh,
Mhm.
things that they teach in school and everything. I was not very interested in getting involved with games and with the other kids. um, Also because the goyim and the dynamics. So I remember that when I was maybe first or second grade, 7 years old, um, in Afghanistan, there was sponsorship of schools by certain governments. Our school was sponsored by French government, and they used to have doctors coming, to give
Mhm.
treatment because again, Afghanistan compared to France, it's the third world country still is. It probably is.
Right.
It's a worse state now than it used to be when I was growing. And he used
Sure.
to he used to have a clinic and kids used to line up to get medical treatment. So I saw these kids getting medical treatment, and I was very interested. And I told them, okay, I'm your assistant. And
Hmm.
he looked at me and he said, okay, start fixing the line of the kids. Start fixing. And then I told the kids, to make line up and nicely to go one by one. And later on, I saw what he's doing. Usually, this classes are during the winter, and usually the kids have upper respiratory disorders, throat and ear. And I saw what he's doing, checking. He showed me a few symptoms, how without getting too technical, how the
Hmm.
mouth and the throat looks, and how red and how and swollen, not swollen. And he said, if this is this, you use this spray. If this is this, you use this spray. So this, after a few months, I was actually okay. You show me. Ah, no, I get done. You go to the doctor. And if it was my throat hurts, now next. So it was,
So from an early age, you already were
yeah.
interested in
I was.
medicine
I saw people
and
suffering,
involved.
and right. I mean,
Right.
someone who was in pain, whatever. I was there
Hmm.
to, and
To help.
it as I grew up, it always was there, the mechanics of the human body, and how when people are sick, why they're sick. It was always in the background of my mind. And as
Right.
I grew older, and then
So it makes sense how you integrated medicine and rabbinic studies seamlessly
right,
because this
right,
was just part of your upbringing, how you grew up.
right.
How did the Japan connection come in? How did you
Okay,
get to Japan?
I came, I came to Japan. I came to Japan to do research in medicine, not to be a rabbi.
Mhm.
I remember when I was in yeshiva, I was in yeshiva, and one of the, again, yeshiva, you're in your teens, and especially in Israel, and I was wanted to learn certain way, and yeah, again, the yeshiva has its own way of teaching. And
Mhm.
one of the rabbis told me, I want you to become in the line of your forefathers who were rabbis, whatever, you become a big rabbi. I said, me, Barak, God forbid. I saw my father, I saw this, what they had through, we had to go through to be a rabbi for 20 years.
Right.
No, not for me.
No.
So I'm coming to Japan to do medical research and studying certain aspects of Oriental medicine here in Japan. And so that was very fascinating. I'm with the Japanese learning all these um, methods of treatment, which is not very common. And then at that time in early 90s, there were a lot of young Israeli travelers,
Wait,
traveling.
were you married at this point or you weren't married yet?
I was, well, okay. Just before I moved to Japan, I met my wife through my sister.
Who's al who's also from,
I don't know.
Afghanistan
She's Afghan.
parents?
She's a New Yorker, but her parents are all Afghani. Yes,
Okay.
my zhut, because her brother and everyone, they had to marry out, and then, they couldn't find.
Right.
So for me, Baruch Hashem was. So my sister said, maybe you should meet this guy. I said, well, I'm a New Yorker, American. I'm, you're coming from Israel. It's, I've been
Right.
a
Sure.
foreign.
Different culture.
So
Right.
it's a different culture. And then I came to Japan, and we kept some communication. And after 1 year of distant communication and few visits to United States, and I said, okay, okay, let's get married.
Right.
And moved, and she moved with me to. So that time, when we were a young couple,
Mhm.
and there were a lot of young Israelis here who were traveling around the world, especially, the whole idea of after the army world tour and
Right, they go
Orient.
on tours.
Right. So the India and the Orient in the Far East was very, very, it still is very,
Mhm.
uh, it's destination
Fascinating for them.
fascinating
Sure.
for. And a lot of them came here. The money is finished because they want to continue to Australia and New Zealand and Papua New Guinea.
Right.
And so they start working in the streets here in Japan, selling all these tchotchkes, and most of them coming from traditional families. in
Right.
Japan has a very unique atmosphere. The Japanese are very close-knit society. They don't let outsiders to be part of the society.
Mm.
They have even a word for non-Japanese people, gaijin, meaning you're an outsider. For
Mm.
us, as a Jew, for me, it's fine. Like, I don't want to
Right. You wanted to
integrate.
be an outsider, right?
I want to be outside. It's fine with me. But few people who are more in Western culture that everything is the same, and we are all, and people are
Together
less
the
frugal,
same, right?
whatever, and they're coming to Japan and they feel, and also the conversation here in Japan is like, okay, where are you coming from? Um, what's your culture? And they ask a little bit about Yiddishkeit, and they're in shock. And so the Japanese say, you have no idea about your own culture? You have no
Mm.
idea about your history?
Mm.
And that's after a while being very in alienation from the society
Mhm.
that you're working and you're traveling. It creates this earning to, okay, what I
To
am,
find who
right?
am
So
I?
what
Interesting.
I
So they yearn for their identity. They wanna know more about who
so,
they are, these
so
Israelis.
so a lot of them were at that time they were traditional Jews coming from,
Mhm.
traditional food. It's Shabbat is Shabbat, but they can go watch TV or go to a football game. But come the high holidays, well, they won't hear
Mhm.
shofar. It's unheard of. And they told me, like, you are the most rabbinical rabbi among us. You organize something. I was, like, yes, no, yes, no, and uh, you have to understand, that the context is this: how the decision was made to become what we are doing now. My first contact with the Rebbe was when I was very young age, in
Mhm.
my teens. I sent a letter to the Rebbe about meditation,
Mhm.
because I was involved in all these Oriental and Far East, ideas, and I asked some of the rabbis. Unfortunately, in the 80s, most of the rabbis,
Didn't
like
know
most,
anything.
they
Right.
don't meditation. What's meditation? There's today, Baruch Hashem, there's more understanding and
For
people, right? There's a shaliach who was coming to my yeshiva to give Tanya classes. Told me, write to the Rebbe. It's okay.
Mm.
No, write to the Rebbe, and I got a beautiful answer. I mean, whatever the Rebbe says is not important, right? Because it was very, very private. But it was two things. First, he understands me. like
Right.
like the Rebbe understands what I'm saying, what I'm asking, right? And then
And that was so new,
the
right? That was
Lemaise, what to do, right? Because for me,
right.
it wasn't to do meditation for the sake of something, it was part of my Jewish life. And
Right.
what to do with it, I was like, and then later on, a few years ago, when I met the Rebbe himself, that was shocking experience. Um,
What was that like?
I mean, I went to see the Rebbe, and like everyone waiting for a few hours. My family, my father, and everything used to have yichidut with the Rebbe all the time. So, but you grew up when
Really?
you
What,
go to
your
see the
father
Rebbe.
would go to your father would travel to New York?
Well, when he was in New York, he used to go to the Rebbe, and my grandfather
Right.
and the whole family.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it was obvious that, okay, I'm going to the Rebbe. I was alone. I stood on like everyone else, and I went to ask. I asked the Rebbe two things. There was one and second. And the Rebbe answered me only about the second one. I asked for bracha for two things. And then
Mhm.
the Rebbe gave me bracha for the second thing. And the first one, Rebbe sort of didn't say anything. So, and the Rebbe was actually pushing me out. I said, you're
Right.
not pushing me out. I'm waiting for the Rebbe to answer. You're not pushing me. And the Rebbe saw me looking at him. And I was still like, he saw the shock on my face. So, and the Rebbe give you the blessing with the condition. Like,
Can you tell us what these 2
no,
things
no,
were,
no.
or is it too personal? It's too
Again,
personal, right?
those, I think
Those were personal, right.
the
So
culmination of that bracha is what's happening here in Japan. I can tell you that.
uh-huh.
But the Rebbe
Wow.
just put it in a in a condition. If this and this, then okay. And then
Wow.
I left, and I was like, look, so again, you're talking about someone who was like 17, 18 and Israeli minded and a little bit full of
Right.
himself, right?
Right.
What? I thought to myself, I stood here long, I mean, with everyone else here. I know the rabbis. I was in yeshiva. I met great rabbis. You ask for bracha, bracha v'atzlacha, and
Right.
that's it. Conditions, no condition. I said, okay, maybe I didn't understand. Something happened. So I said, okay, I'll go behind again in the line and ask again.
Right. Right.
So I was walking and I said to myself, okay, now the Yetzer Tov talking to me and he says, why are you here? So I'm here to see the Rebbe. And why you want to see the Rebbe? Because he's the Rebbe. So if he's the Rebbe, and this is the conversation that as I'm walking,
Right.
if he's the Rebbe, he told you what he told you, right? What's the point of standing in line and asking him again? It's taking the
Right.
place of another Jew who needs probably something more important than you. You already got what you need. And
Right.
then
Wow.
there was like, I stopped and went home and the idach zil v'gmor, and the rest is history, as they say.
Wow. But you say that that blessing is what or those conditions is what helps you in
Right,
Japan
right.
now.
Yeah.
How?
So
Can you tell us how that is?
I'm in general, I don't like, it's very hard to talk. I'm very invert and like I'm not. If you now people see me like standing from the congregation and having a talk, right? I'm a mohel, and usually they sometimes there are 300-400 people waiting for me to do Mila, and everyone's looking at me. It's
Right.
very uncomfortable, very
Right.
uncomfortable. So I do it because I have to do it, not because I
Right.
want to do it. Um,
Right.
and certain things the Rebbe said, like in his letters that he wrote, and Friedrich Rebbe also his writing to the Rebbe. I mean, I understood what the Rebbe goes through with his own personal life. I mean, some people
Right.
don't like to be extroverted. Like
Right.
you don't want to
Right.
sit down there and all these opinionate people who are opinionated, giving opinions about everything. All right, okay. I
Right.
so I don't
Right.
have anything to say. I will be in my corner, not say anything. But
Right.
the idea was that if you are in a situation that people need you, you
Mm.
can't you can't keep quiet.
Hmm.
You can't
Wow.
say it's not because if you are needed, step
This is
up.
what you need for. Right.
So when the
And
people
that
came
led
to
you to
exactly.
that led you in Japan to really reach out to these people.
No, they reach out
Wow.
to me. That's what I'm
They
saying.
reached out to you, but to
I
really
couldn't
step out,
couldn't
step up.
make myself to reach out to them at the beginning because it was too
Right.
presumptuous that I'm going to reach out to them who I am, what I am.
Right.
You Okay, so I learned
But
in
when
yeshiva. I didn't, but what does it mean? It
right.
doesn't mean nothing, right? So
Right.
they asked me, well, please, can you do? I can tell you, the first Rosh Hashanah we did. I mean, there was other functions that we did, Hanukkah and everything that people were joyous and everything. But the first Rosh Hashanah, Japanese houses are very very small. Um, we're talking about meters. Like the living room was on 2 meters on 3 meters. It's uh, how much is it in in feet? I have
Square
no
f
idea. I mean, it's
right.
small. We took all the furniture out, right? And there were 60 people davening there. I
Wow.
blew the shofar. All the Japanese started looking what's going on here, and it was the most amazing experience. I mean, 60 people were cramped for 2 days.
Mm.
All the tefillot. I can tell you the people there, if you have seen them in the dark, you would go to the other side of the street.
Mm.
The way they looked,
Wow. Right. They were
piercing,
scary. Right.
piercings, long hair, Indian mohawks, and like tattoos. A guy who was, sorry to say it, so high that his eye or was like yellow, like a cat. Like
Right.
they were
Wow.
Jews. And then you find out that that guy that looks like American native chief, like with all these feathers and all these things sticking out of his ear. He walked for each tefillah an hour and a half,
Wow. Hmm.
and he's keeping kosher. And
Hmm.
the guy was involved in everything else that we had to do. It wasn't, and so I told myself, like, who, so how you can, there you, I mean,
Wow.
they're
How
your
could you
flesh and
not be
blood.
there? Exactly. 100%. Wow.
They're fresh and
That's
blood, and they
amazing.
ask you to do something you can't, and that's how it started. And later on, became Beit Chabad, and
Right. Like,
Baruch
later
Hashem.
on, the shliach came out there. Right.
Right. So the shaliach that came, Rabbi Mendes Lukevich, is like my younger brother. He came to help
Right.
me with all these functions, right?
Wow.
Because
That's
a lot of
amazing.
functions. You can't be a father. You can't be after the rabbi.
Right.
You can't also do the medicine.
Right.
And
You
the
can't
long
do
hours.
everything.
It's not a. I mean, we didn't feel that we are overwhelmed that we can't do it, but we wanted to grow. We wanted to do it more.
Sure. Right.
So
Sure.
so so we reached out, and Baruch Hashem, he came. We chose him because he was very suitable and he's a big tzaddik, really big tzaddik. And
Amazing. Wow.
and Baruch Hashem, now uh, we have how many shluchim we have here? We have a Beit Chabad here, which is a whole building. We have a mikveh, we have two restaurants, and we have the rabbi in Kobe and the community. And I mean,
Wow.
talking about a community which was conservative reform. I didn't understand what conservative reforms were till I came to Japan.
Right.
So I had to, and Baruch Hashem, today we're completely different.
Beautiful. Did you ever think that you'd be there for so long?
No,
That you'd still be in Japan? No.
no,
I mean,
no.
you're 30 years there already?
35 years, 35 years,
35 years.
more than
Wow. Wow.
36 years. Yeah.
And you say the Rebbe's bracha is what is holding you,
So
guiding
so
you till
it said
today?
that, so the Rebbe's bracha was, the condition was to be fulfilled, and the dividends are all the things that we see around, personal
Amazing.
and the
Beautiful.
community. Yeah. So it's
Beau
it's it's I mean,
Incredible.
it's a lot of things going around here, and Baruch Hashem. I mean, people ask me how it happened. I said, ask the Rebbe. It's all
Right.
his,
Right.
it's all his
Right.
blessings.
Right. Are there many Chabad centers there now today in
So
Japan?
today, so we have well, the two cities were very major. They're the Tokyo, and then there's another city which is Kobe.
Mhm.
So both have rabbis were shlichim, Rabbi Mendes Lukevich and his brother-in-law, Rabbi
Mhm.
Vishetsky Shmuel, and he's
Mhm.
there, and people come and go. I love the children. Again, Baruch Shem Rabbi Lukevich has his own older children, and they're getting
Wow.
married. So
Incredible. Wow. So I wanna ask you also, I know that you're involved in infertility in your medical,
right, yes.
specialty turned to that. Can you tell us a little about how you got into that and what
Okay,
it's like
so
for you
I
today?
I came to Japan to do research into neuromuscular diseases, and later on, it be, it 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 was actually family issue that there was halachic questions. So I started doing research in myoma and fibrosis, and then later on in infertility. And I can tell you, for the
Mm,
past 20 years, the problem of infertility, it's not very talked about among, again, it's not only a Jewish problem, it's a pandemic. It's all around. It's Today they say one of six in the world cannot conceive,
mm,
and it's terrible. But I think
mm,
it's not one in six, because they also calculate regions of the world, right?
mm,
Africa and
mm,
Sudan, and that they have 6, 7 kids or 8 kids on average. But I'm talking about
mm,
what we call it the developed world:
mm,
Japan, Korea, Singapore. It's very bad. I mean, there are
mm.
areas that are actually closing down elementary schools because there are no kids. And also in Europe,
Wow.
same thing. And so for us, you know, also it's very, very important. So we are not escaping the same problem. So
Right.
there are a lot of kids who get married, and I can tell you one thing: if it's a ladies' issue, Baruch Hashem, we know what to do. I mean, there are
Mm.
more or less there are very solid treatments that a lot of these problems can be solved easily. Well, it
Mhm.
takes time, but it can be solved. Boys becoming a
Mhm.
big issue now. So you see
Mhm.
kids, our environment, who get married, and usually they're fairly young, 1 year, 2 year
Mhm.
past, and unfortunately, no one talks because they're embarrassed.
Mhm.
They're not going to talk to their parents. The parents, because they feel that it's too much intrusive to just newlywed, and then
Right.
3 years, 4 years, and then their friends already have children, and they go to the
Mhm.
bris, and they go to their smachot, and they
Hmm.
had a couple that I was treating. They had to move community. They couldn't stand
Wow.
all these
Wow,
questions.
it's so hard.
So, so
Sure.
hard, so hard, so hard. So it's a problem. It's a big problem that needs to be, it needs to be surfaced. I mean, people have to talk about it. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not saying publicly, at least within the
Right.
family. If
Right.
you see that, I think I'm very drastic in this. I say from young age, especially girls, if you see that at age 12, 13, 14, there are issues with her monthly cycle, please get involved. It's not going
And
to
what should
destroy.
someone do? What
Um,
should
you know,
someone do?
today, Baruch Hashem, internet is full of information, good information, right?
Mhm.
And research, and there are a lot of Jewish fertility organizations that actually deal with these concepts. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lady came to me. Her daughter wants to get married, and she never had her period. So I
Mhm.
said, "How it's possible?" Oh, she told me the medical issues. I said, "No, no, don't teach me medicine. Tell me how it's possible that you, as a mother, you have a daughter in your house. She's 18 now. Never bothered you to ask?" She
Mhm.
said, "Yes, we have so many kids, and I didn't want to be, you know, I want to give her space." I said, "What do you mean space? This is dina nefashot. We're talking about life here. Like
Mhm.
these are halachically we call dina nefashot. These are the most fundamental halachic issues that we have.
Mhm.
So to get involved nicely with a lot of
Mhm.
compassion, a lot of compassion.
Mhm.
We need a lot of compassion because a lot of people, a lot of these couples. I mean, if you go to fertility clinics all around the world, even in the United States, you see the average age is around 25, 26. It's terrible. Imagine that,
Mhm.
people in their early 20s or early 30s. I'm talking about from communities who want children. I'm not talking about people who decide, okay, they
Right.
want career or whatever, and they want to push off,
Right.
motherhood or whatever later on, or fatherhood. I'm talking about people who
Mhm.
want children, and you see that, something is not working, or medically
Mhm.
that you see not, or she's complaining, whatever. Show compassion and show interest nicely,
Mhm.
and it can solve a lot of issues later on.
Hmm. Interesting.
And,
Wow.
and
So get a
there's a lot of options
Mhm.
for young people that can solve the issue without becoming very, very severe later on.
Mhm. So you mean the earlier you start, the better it is? Is that what you're
Right,
trying to say?
right, right, right.
Right.
I'm talking again
Interesting.
people who are Baruch Hashem getting married young age, and they're building their own beautiful families and everything. And then
Right.
after 1 years, whatever, I mean, usually uh, it's not the issue of the woman of the house, but usually it's all both. I never
Mhm.
Usually when I see the couples, I say both of you go, and it's
Mhm.
usually both of them have issues. Today,
Mhm.
to get pregnant, it's a mess. It's a
Wow.
blessing. It's not. I mean, I see case. I mean, I can tell you, like few last year, um, again, family member who introduced me to a couple. They had a boy, they had a child, and then they tried to have more, and she couldn't. 1 year, 2 year,
Mhm.
and she goes to fertility clinic, and they told her to do this and this and this, and then they told her, okay, to call me for also an advice. As the Rebbe
Mhm.
used to say, uh, doctor who was also a friend,
Mhm.
the Yedid, also Yedid, So I told her, please, what they're telling you is very drastic. Let's do something which is less, more holistic in nature. And Baruch Hashem, after it wasn't chick chack, it wasn't like bang, It took 6 months, and Baruch Hashem, she had another child.
Oh,
And
wow.
so,
Wow.
but so it happens. You can see that people. I mean, I, I, I don't know if you remember when I was growing up, people used to have families of 14, 16 children. It was very normal
Mhm.
in Bnei Brak.
Mhm.
Do you know any families now that average have 14, 16 kids? Why?
Right. Very few. Right.
I
What
mean,
what
what
why
happened?
is that? Why is conception so much harder nowadays?
I
Why is
think it's
infertility
a lot.
so much more common?
So we call it here stress with capital S, meaning that is a lot to do with environmental issues, a lot of processed food, a lot of
Mhm.
chemicals we use for their daily life. We live in
Mhm.
radiation, constant radiation. So we live like today, we have this conversation, right? Wi-Fi, this, even the lights in this, where I am today, around me, there's so many machines that, Wi-Fi, it's, um, each one in itself is not a problem.
Mm.
When it become a critical threshold, then manifests itself in many ways. And one of the things is fertility, which is the most delicate part,
Mm.
of human, you can call it physiology and biology. I mean,
Right.
Rambam, he wrote one of the main medical treatises that he wrote for the Sultan was about fertility, meaning
Mm.
how
Right.
to invigorate to be fertile, because
So
that's
is there anything that we can do about it living in these living in modern times where we're surrounded by all this, toxic chemicals and technology and all that perhaps in foods and
yes,
all that are
there's a lot of things to be done. There are many things which are unavoidable. You have iPhone, you have to use your iPhone, right? You have to use your laptop. You have to. I mean, this part of life. Then, you know, you can't. You have to walk the street, and the street have. But
Mhm.
things that you can control: what you
Mhm.
eat clean. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about diet soda and diet, because it's a fad, which is good for business of some of those big companies. But we know that all these diet food did not contribute anything for the health of the Western
Right.
world. We know that.
Right.
Um, so eat clean. Eat as I mean, Baruch Hashem, we lived in Japan. I had to become a
Clean
baker.
meaning clean meaning like unprocessed foods as much as you can?
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
Look, in Japan, one of the greatest things was the hardship. I mean, look, we came here. There was nothing, no bread,
Mhm.
no mayo, no ketchup. So everything, even today, a lot of things that we do at home. So
Mhm.
I became the baker. My wife, she's doing the cakes and the cookings and everything. And also Rabbi Mendy, he's the baker.
Right.
and
Wow.
and we had to. People come, hundreds of people come every week, and there's
Wow.
no supermarket, Jewish supermarket, bakery that I go and source from them. Okay, I need to this. We have to bake. So
You have to do it. Wow. Right.
when you do it yourself,
You're a lot
I'm
healthier.
saying in the United States you don't have to do it. But again, there is
Right.
a mitzvah of Avchashat Challah, right? There's a mitzvah of
Right.
Challah today with all these mixers, and it's very easy to make. And
Right.
Shabbat, the blessing of the says of all these glorious things that the Torah is promising about Hafoshat Challah and everything. Why not? Why not to do the Challah for Shabbat at home?
Right.
Nachon, it takes some time, but not such a long time. I mean,
Right.
I can do it,
100%. Right.
And
And
if
you
I can do it, I think everyone
right.
can do it.
It's
And
amazing.
that is
Wow.
clean. And that's clean,
Right.
meaning that not, again, there's no shelf life that you have to worry about,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
if you want to eat anything from supermarket, if you see the panel of the ingredients, right? If it is more than two, three ingredients, don't touch it. If you can,
Right. Right.
if you can.
Right. That's a
If you
good
want
tip.
to have, right, if you want to have cheese, have whole milk cheese, right? All
Right.
these diet schmites doesn't help you. Doesn't help your health. Doesn't help your figure. Doesn't help nothing. Have
Right.
whole food the way that it used to be in the past. Uh,
Right.
that's Baruch Hashem. I have to say, the idea of eating simple and clean is becoming the new norm and the new
Right.
fad.
Yeah.
That's that's
100%.
that's wonderful. So
Right.
those things you
Wow.
can control. Those things you can control,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
the shampoos that you use, and the toothbrushes, and the toothpaste that you use. Baruch Hashem, there are a lot of companies who are into helping humanity. They are. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
their business is to make money, of
Mhm.
course, but they want
Mhm.
to, while they're providing good, you know, they're a little bit more expensive. That's true. That's true.
Mhm.
But the long-term benefit is your health, your life.
100%. Right. Wow. Rabbi Simantov, it's so intriguing speaking to you. I want to ask you one last question. Thinking back on your life, on the very many varied elements that you've been involved with. I know you're involved with hashgacha as well, kosher
Right.
supervision. You're a moyel. You mentioned you do circumcision. You're involved with fertility, and as a medical doctor and a rabbi, and the first person who was really involved in doing outreach in Japan and until these Chabad rabbis, came. Looking
Right.
back
They
at your
didn't stop.
very
I'm continuing doing it.
and you're continuing to do it, of course, censored to do it. Yes, 100%. So looking back at, the last many years of your life, especially in Japan, where you're so involved in bringing Yiddishkeit to the masses, what is there something like that you feel was the biggest impact that you've done there that you are proud of or that you feel like this was something that was so important?
Yes, I mean, definitely there is. Those groups of people that I became involved with, you see, you know the story of Rabbi Akiva, right? Till age 40, the guy was Amaretz.
Mm.
That's
He didn't
now
learn. He was totally ignorant, didn't know any
ignorant.
Torah.
And if you see the expression that he used about rabbis of contemporary rabbis was shocking. And then what he became,
Mhm.
became like, the
Greatest
what
sage of the time.
not of the time. All the Torah that we have today is Rabbi
Right.
Akiva. Very simple. Now, I saw it in my own eyes that people who were about to get assimilated, either with a Japanese girl or with another, just a little bit of effort to reach out, not to reach out to teach them, to reach out to touch them,
Mm.
just to tell them, your skin is my skin and your heart is my heart, and she is not. And to make them realize this, I can tell you that some of them are great rabbis today themselves.
Mhm.
They have their own yeshivot, and they are not just yeshiva sitting, and they're doing outreach themselves. And they are, I mean, there's one guy that I'm very involved with still. He is, I would say, he works with people maybe 16, 17 hours a day,
Mhm.
and he gives his life to people, and he's big Talmid Chacham, very big. I mean, he writes books that I can tell you, I don't understand. I mean,
Mhm.
he's mamash, one of the gedolim, really. And you see these people who are just about to get lost completely. When you get assimilated, right? There's no, I mean, this is like the bottom of the bottom, right?
Mhm.
And you see that just by just reaching out. And so all those people that I
Mhm.
mentioned, none of them got assimilated. None of them. and all of them have beautiful Jewish life. Some of them, as a rabbi, some of them are just simple Jews living, having beautiful families in France and in Israel, United States. A lot of them are in Israel now because the idea is for the Jews to be in Israel. I'm
Mm,
pushing them again because study and to grow in Yiddishkeit in Israel is much easier. For
right.
people who want to fulfill their life and that for me that's again, I don't feel that it is my achievement. I would say it's my simcha that I'm
Mm,
looking at this and I'm saying, this is possible. And
mm,
I'm rejoicing that they are what they are. To see them actually living their full potential as a Jew. Not full, but striving to the fullness. That
right.
otherwise there will be God knows where.
Amazing. Really amazing. And
Right.
it's that Rabbi Simantov, thank you so much for
My
sharing
pleasure.
with us today.
My
Thank you for
pleasure.
all that you are doing in Japan. Thank you for
My
moving
pleasure.
there and taking
Thank
on the hardships there and
thank you.
reaching out to people and reaching their hearts. It's
Thank you.
really just amazing what you're doing. Wow, there were so many different parts to this interview with Rabbi Dr. Simantov, so many layers of what he is and what he represents, and facets of his life. I found it fascinating to hear about his life in Afghanistan and his family's life there before they had to leave, how faith was just something so integral to their being. It wasn't something that they needed to learn, it was something that they experienced. And their whole way of life was just so integrated with Torah and Judaism. I felt it was like kind of a step back into the past and really learning a different way of life, a different mentality. And I found that part really interesting. I also was really fascinated by how he stepped into his role when he came to Japan. He came as a doctor. He came to learn. He further developed his learning in specializing in the field of fertility, which was another completely new part, a new layer of this interview and the work that he does with families in that area. But I felt it was fascinating to see how when he stepped into his role in Japan, he wasn't coming to be a shliach there. And yet he found himself doing just that. He was called upon to do that. And you could sense from the way he was speaking how he was feeling that he didn't want the attention. He didn't want to be the center of attention and everyone looking at him and the one that's doing all these things. But yet he felt the calling to be doing something because he stepped up to the plate with the Rebbe's brachos, of course, to be who to develop that part of himself because this is what was called of him. And I think that was an important message for all of us when we are in a role that we don't necessarily want ourselves to be in or we don't exactly ask for it, but when we need to just step up to the role because this is what is needed of us. And I thought that message was quite powerful. I love the story that he told with that Israeli backpacker with that tattoos and all, who you wouldn't think that he would belong in a shul, and yet he was so full of sincerity because when we, as Rabbi Dr. Simantov said, when we just open ourselves up to help another person and help them see what they are, it comes shining through so clearly. If you enjoy watching these interviews, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. We are also on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Give us a like, drop us a comment, share with us what you thought. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this extraordinary community.